We are at the moment coming to the end of a big 5-year funded project by the HRC called Editing Robert Burns for the 21st Century. And the project has underpinned the research for the first 5 volumes of a new Oxford edition of the works of Robert Burns, edited by Jerry Carruthers here at Glasgow. Volume 1 is already out, that's Nigel Leask's edition of Burns's prose works, but volumes 2 to 5 are covering the major contribution Burns made to 2 very important song collections at the time, the end of the 18th, beginning of the 19th century. Volumes 2 to 5 are covering the major contributions Burns made to 2 very important song collections in his lifetime. And we have gone right back to the very first publications of those collections, which are very beautiful musical editions with music and text. And what we wanted to do was explore what it would have meant for people in Burns's day to have bought these songs. So they were quite expensive to buy, and they generally were marketed either to be on the shelf as a kind of repository of Scots song, or to be played by people in their front rooms. We wanted to kind of bring together a group of young musicians to explore what that might have meant. So we gave them copies of the very original publications that had appeared in 1787 or 1803 or whatever, and we asked them to kind of build a performance from what they could see on paper. And we brought together a group of 11 young musicians, people who were interested in early performance, so people who play violin or cello, but Baroque violin or cello, or early violin or cello with gut strings, and a couple of keyboard players who were interested in playing the harpsichord or the very early piano, and a guitarist who was very interested in 18th century guitar, and a small group of singers who have had singing lessons. Some of them know about Burns, some of them had sung some Scots songs, some of them knew nothing about Robert Burns, and it was the same with the instrumentalists. And over 2 months we brought them together for a number of workshops, shared some of the research that we'd been doing on the songs. We chose about 25 songs for them to perform, half from the Scots Musical Museum and half from George Thomson's big collections of national songs. And we just kind of jammed these songs, I suppose, to see what it might have been like actually in Burns's day for people who had a little bit of musical education but maybe weren't professional players, and how the songs might have sounded. And in the process of doing that, of course, we introduced these songs to quite a number of these musicians who hadn't come across them before. Part of the aim was to play around with, mostly now we're dealing with replicas of instruments from that period, but to play around with what it would have sounded like. Yeah, with gut-stringed instruments, with harpsichord, with an early piano, early guitar, singers having to play with those instruments when they might not be used to doing that. So they're used to playing with a big grand piano or whatever now. So that was a new experience for a number of the singers, working with the original publications, which gave them a sense its music is not published like that anymore. So young musicians nowadays are not dealing with a printed copy like you would have found in the late 18th century. So that was a wonderful kind of learning curve, and how the text was printed and how confusing that was for them and all of those kinds of things. But I think, we were trying to kind of recreate something of an idea of how the songs would have sounded. People love Burns's songs for all the right reasons. I mean, they are just, fantastic. And we hear them in a whole load of guises now. I mean, if you searched on YouTube, you can hear Burns done any which way. And very often people don't know that Burns's songs were mostly created or collected for big collections of printed songs. So people don't really know what those sounded like, and they don't really know that bit of Burns's background, because the songs have been kind of taken out of that context and have become what they are to people today, which is a bit of everything, really. So I think for us, the edition is based on those early publications. It's all about what that kind of context was at that time, Burns's interactions with the editors of these collections, Burns's interactions with what was happening with songs elsewhere in print as well as outside print, and how all of that came together. So we wanted to find a project which would breathe life into that resource, which is actually the backbone of our major edition. To buy those publications, one had to be pretty professional people. And this was the time where the middle classes were really beginning to grow. So the main clientele, I think, for this for both of these publications, the museum and especially for Thomson, which are very opulent publications, was people who had a bit of cash. And they would have nice drawing rooms, and they would be able to afford a square piano or a harpsichord, and they would have friends who were learning instruments at that time. So it is very much for the middle classes, and that's something which is also very unattractive for the vast majority of Burns lovers, who really just want things right back. They just want the melody or they just want a singer with a fiddle, and the songs work beautifully that way. I mean, there's no denying the songs work beautifully that way. Often they work best that way. But that's not how they originally appeared. It's not, and Burns was very actively involved in both of these collections. He knew what he was contributing to, he saw the publications, he commented on them, and he was really keen to be involved in that process. So I suppose we're opening up what is probably a little bit of a controversial area, and not everybody will like these settings. We haven't recorded them so that people will like them, but we've recorded them because that's what they are. And just to see them in print didn't bring them alive enough for a 21st century listener or somebody interested in Burns today.